Okay.
Alright.
Really?
Welcome back everyone to another video. Today we are going to epoxy our guides on our fishing rod. What you need here is you want something that's aluminum, which helps from creating as much bubbles in your epoxy and reduces. And it also helps your epoxy from gelling up too quick. You need some applicators, which is just a regular paintbrush. Cheap paintbrushes from Walmart. You can buy a pack of these at Walmart for $1. And then you want syringes.
And then show the syringe up close.
Well, they know what a syringe is.
They might not know what kind of syringe.
I'm gonna tell them.
Alright.
Alright, and then you need syringes for measuring your epoxy. You can buy a big bulk of these for, I think there's 100 of them in a box on Amazon for $15. And then, of course, your epoxy. The epoxy that I use is Flex Coat. The epoxy I use is Flex Coat Ultra High Build. And this also helps protect from UV rays from the sun, like fading your threads and whatnot. Alright, you can pause it. Alright, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to use syringes. That way your measurements for each part is exactly perfect. Because if you don't have your measurements right, then your epoxy could not harden right or something could go wrong with it. So you want to try to get it perfect, and the best way to do that is with syringes with measurements in milliliters. And this, we're going to just start out with 2 milliliters of each one. About out of epoxy on this. 2 milliliters of your hardener, 2 milliliters of your epoxy. And 2 milliliters of our hardener. Okay, and then take your applicator and mix it up. When you first mix your epoxy, it's going to turn into a marble color, and then you just keep mixing it until it clears back up into a clear of epoxy color. But you don't have to, you can pause it. Okay, when I put epoxy on the rod or on your guides, I like to do 2 coats. And there's 2 reasons why I do that. The first reason is it seals all your threading, so when your final coat, no bubbles pop up. And then the second reason I do that is just keep rolling. And then the second reason is, after my fucking coat, you're a bitch.
Why can't you talk?
Just keep going.
Alright.
After my second, the second reason is if I got any tags or tags. Alright. The second reason is if I have any bumps from like tag ends or whatever, after my first coat is dried, I can just slice it all off, and then all my threading will be smooth for the final coat. Okay.
Alright.
You're going to take your brush and you're going to use it as a squeegee. So we're going to remove the epoxy all the way down through all the way down to the threading. So when our epoxy is dried, you're still going to actually
It's fine.
You're still going to actually feel the threading on the first coat. And then the final coat is when we'll actually cover all the threading. But we're just, right now, we're locking down the threading and sealing everything up for the final coat. So basically just remove all the epoxy. So basically just remove all the epoxy down to the threading. Use your brush as a squeegee. Just like that. This ain't gonna work.
Why?
Because they're making a bunch of noises.
Nobody cares. It's going to be a very tiny, faint voice in the background.
Okay, I bet you it ain't.
Hold on. Let me focus. Alright.
Okay, after you have all your threading on all your guides soaked with epoxy, we're going to take our brush and we're going to use it as a squeegee and remove of whatever epoxy we can all the way down to the threading. That way it seals everything up. And then when it dries, we'll put our final coat on. So we're just using the brush as a squeegee to remove the epoxy we just put on. All the way down to the thread. And you do that on every one. You do that on every one of your guides or whatever we're putting epoxy on. I don't even need to say that. I'll move to this one.
Now, you know I can't really see the brush that well.
That's
Just
fine.
the tip of it.
But just remove all your epoxy that you can with your brush. And then let it. Oh, that's probably good, ain't it? From what I said.
Yeah.
Alright, you can stop. Okay, so remember, first coat, soak all your threading, remove the epoxy, and down to your threading. Let it dry overnight, and it'll be ready for the final coat.
Yeah.
Alright, everybody, it's the next day, and the first coat is dried. And this is when you want to take a razor blade, and if you have any, you ain't gonna be able to see it, but if you have any like tag ends or anything popping up through your epoxy, you want to take a razor blade and slice everything off even with the epoxy, so that way nothing pops through your second coat and it will look more professional. Just go down through each one of your guides and check for any kind of bumps or anything like that before you apply your final coat. Just slice it all off even. Don't cut down into your actual wrap. Which that's probably good. You don't have to.
The pole's in the background.
The what pole?
That. Hold on.
We'll move that way a little bit.
Alright.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right, after you got everything cleaned up, I said all right. After you have everything cleaned up with the razor, and then you're ready for your final coat of epoxy. And just remember, I want you to look at me when I'm doing this part. Just remember, the threading is what's holding your guides down, not your epoxy. So you don't need a boatload of epoxy, and it just doesn't look good. I learned this the hard way. So if you have your epoxy on your guides and it starts to look like a football, then you got too much. But I'll show you how to put the right amount on. So the first thing you want to do, I'll turn my dryer on. We're going to just put some epoxy on. Just get a little bit, cover the whole threading part. It's just basically gonna come down to you gotta just get a feel for how much you need. You just got to do it. But I'll show you a way to find out if you have too much. Okay, the next thing is we're going to do the edges. I got the epoxy on the threads, and then with our applicator, you're going to load the brush up, and you're going to push the epoxy to the edges. And then you're going to go over top of your edge. And it takes a steady hand, it just takes practice. Just take your time. Sometimes it takes my hands to calm down. At the beginning of my epoxy work, I usually be a little shaky. And then the same on each side. If you're having problems loading your brush up with epoxy, and then you ain't got enough.
Alright, I'm going to pause it because the battery's low.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Alright, you ready?
Yeah.
Alright, after your razor blade, you got everything sliced and smoothed out. The next thing is our coat of epoxy. I think the best way to learn probably will be on a dryer, and then after you do a few rods, and then you can go at higher speeds. But I got it on the dryer right now so you can actually see what I'm doing. But I would start out with a dryer speed until you get used to doing it, and then you could pick up and go with a wrapper speed. But anyways, we'll start out. I got some epoxy on my wraps. I just globbed it on there, and then I'll show you. Just start out like that. Glob your epoxy on all your guides, and then this will be your next step.
Hold on.
If you hear it, you ready?
Hold on. She's going to touch this. Hold on.
You can't have that, bro. Here, take that. You ready?
Yeah.
Alright, basically you're going to take your brush. If you hear a bunch of noises, it's my daughter in the background. You're going to take your brush. You ready?
Hold on. Alright.
You're going to take your brush and you're going to load it up, and you're basically going to push the epoxy to the side and overlap the threading to the blank. It kind of takes some practice to do, but keep your hands as, I forgot what I was going to say. Keep your hands as steady as you can to get a smooth line. Don't ever try to tape your lines, it doesn't work. Just for a reference. Just keep pushing your epoxy over and then load it up. It just takes time to practice.
Really?
Just
is that? Yeah.
So basically just push your epoxy to the side and hold your applicator steady to make a nice clean smooth line. Just like that. Load your brush up and push the epoxy over the edge of your threading to make a nice clean smooth line. Try to hold your brush or your applicator in certain ways, whatever way is the best to keep your hands steady. Nothing, I'm telling myself.
Pause.
No, you're fine. I would just edit it. I'll do one more, I guess.
Do you want to show them like the one that you just did? Now it don't look the same, you know.
I'm showing a different thing. Oops, I messed that one up.
Can I pause it for a minute?
Yeah. Hold on, let me fix something real quick.
It's recording, but okay.
Alright, the next thing you want to do when you got your epoxy on your guides, this butane torch is going to tell you if you have too much epoxy, and this will also remove all the bubbles in your epoxy. So you're going to just keep hitting it with the flame off and on. Don't keep your flame on the epoxy because it will burn, and it can burn your threading also. So just keep hitting it, and then remove your bubbles and look at the bottom. You'll start seeing the unneeded epoxy drip off, and then you basically keep hitting it until no more epoxy comes off. And then sometimes you just get your finger with the last drip. That is perfect amount of epoxy that you need on your guides. I always get that last little drip with my finger, and then that's perfect. That way it looks real professional, and it's not globbed up and does not look like a football. And then perfect amount of epoxy, and there's no bubbles. So basically I could sit here and show you over and over, but you just got to practice, and then you'll get it. It's not as hard as you think. But just remember, you can have the best thread work in the world, but if your epoxy doesn't look good, then your rod's not going to look good. So if you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and we'll catch you on the next one. Hit that subscribe button.